All right. Welcome, everyone. Hello. Welcome to another episode of BIM After Dark Live. This is episode 76. My guest is a returning guest. Been on the show a few times, and we're going to be talking about not Revit 2023, but Dynamo for Revit 2023. I'm sure you guys have all seen videos and articles about all the new features in the latest release of Revit. Maybe you've seen some of them for Dynamo, but there's some pretty big and significant changes, and so I decided to bring back my Dynamo guru that I reach out to when I'm stuck, John Pierson, and so I'll introduce him soon. For those of you joining us live here in the chat, be sure to ask questions along the way. Thank you for joining us. For those of you that have come here for the first time, this is a weekly live stream where we talk about Revit, BIM, and any really related topics along that fashion. So thank you guys for joining. And also be sure to subscribe to the channel here on YouTube to know when I go live, as well as some other different videos that I release throughout the week. You've probably seen some of the shorts I've been testing out, see how that format works out, as well as office hour sessions from the community that I host. And you'll start seeing a new series coming up very soon that I'm super excited about, so stay tuned to that. And then finally, thank you to our sponsor, Twinmotion, for sponsoring this episode. For those of you that haven't heard of Twinmotion before, Twinmotion is a real-time rendering engine that is built on the Unreal Engine with some amazing features that you definitely should check out. If you've tried out any other real-time rendering program, you'll realize that Twinmotion has some serious flexibility. You can add many different layers. You can do all kinds of great things like bring in Quixel Mega Scans, bring in obviously Revit models, but also context, cloud host your models, and a bunch of different things. I've also have a lot of videos you can see down below. I will link them here on the channel to walk you through some features. What I decided to do each week is highlight a couple of the features that I like from Twinmotion 2022, and the feature I'm highlighting today is Path Tracer. So for those of you familiar with Twinmotion, you know that real-time rendering uses path tracing or ray tracing technology when you want higher quality. And so in the latest release of 2022, you actually have the ability to use it. And what that means is this is your typical Twinmotion interior scene. If you turn on Path Tracer, you'll see the lighting, the reflection, the artificial lighting, all the materials get bumped up. It really is true real-time ray tracing within the environment, within a actual live real-time model. So if you're interested, please check out twinmotion.com/BIMAfterDark for a free trial. It'll let them know that you support the channel. It'll let them know that you support this show. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Twinmotion. Again, that's twinmotion.com/BIMAfterDark. Alrighty then. I see a few people already in the chat asking some questions, asking John some questions. I'm definitely going to keep an eye on the chat and make sure that we get as many of your questions answered as possible. And Rick, this is not brandy in this giant flask. I hate to break it to you. I'm sorry, it's water, but that would be quite a bit of brandy. So without further ado, it's time to introduce John Pierson. John, welcome to the show.
Hey. How's it going?
All right, welcome back to the show, I should say. I think this is what, your third or fourth time? I'm not even sure now.
Third or fourth. I think I've been on the show twice with Aaron.
Yep.
Just for little hangouts too. So I've kind of lost count at this point.
Actually, yeah, I think you and Aaron came on long before it was a show, and we just kind of hung out a couple times live streams. One time was a long time, with 2017, 18, something like that.
Yeah, one was right before all of us started working from home.
Yeah, it's true. Yes. Well, welcome back again. Maybe before we jump into the content, for those who don't know who John Pierson is, maybe give everyone a quick overview of yourself and what you're doing here on the show.
For sure. Yeah, so my name's John Pierson. I'm a Revit and Dynamo user. I work at a consultancy called Parallax team with Aaron Mallor, and we have a pretty big crew now. We have Lauren on our team, Melissa, and Allison works with us too. So the team's grown since that first time too quite a bit, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
But I'm a BIM consultant. I do Revit API development, Dynamo graph building, and things like that. I started at an architecture firm building Revit templates and Revit content for an architecture / structural engineering firm, and we had an interiors department. And yeah, I learned Dynamo in 2014, and that's kind of what people know me for nowadays. That and memes, I guess, right? So, but yeah.
Memes within Dynamo too sometimes. Don't forget that.
Yeah. So I'll show that too later. But yeah, I like interacting with the community, speaking at conferences. I'm pumped that conferences are coming back this year, and yeah, just kind of glad to be here.
Awesome. And for those of you who have used Dynamo, you probably have run across something that John has done, whether it's a package like Rhythm, or whether it's a learning unit or a video or a forum post or a forum response. So I'm sure anyone who's dug into Dynamo probably has run into John P somewhere along the way. So I do appreciate you coming on. We're going to talk about Revit 2023, but we're going to focus on Dynamo. And so with that in mind, I'm going to keep up with the questions, guys. But I am going to try to gear the questions that are more towards our topic. I know a lot of people have lots of Dynamo questions they're going to ask, and I'll try to get as many asked to John as possible. But with that, being said, I guess maybe we could just jump right into it, and start off with sort of a broad brush overview. What happened with Dynamo in this 2023 release, man?
Oh man, it's wreaking havoc. No, I'm just kidding. No, so on my screen I have a post open on the Dynamo forum. So if you're not a member on the Dynamo forum, go sign up, because as Jeff said, it's a great place to be, to help people, to get help, all that good stuff. And Saul, who's on the Dynamo team, he posts updates there. So these dark nodes, if you're on the forum or even on Twitter, this probably isn't news to you, this dark mode icons or nodes that are coming out. As you can see, this post is from December of 2021. So Dynamo comes in a few flavors. There's a Dynamo Sandbox release that works without Revit or CAD or whatever. And they started releasing these dark nodes all of a sudden. And we're all like, what the heck's going on? And he has a whole post about it with all the different info about what to expect from it. Mm-hmm. But in short, the library's changed, the nodes have changed, and you're going to find that they're a little different. You're going to upgrade graphs, and you're going to have stuff overlapping. I think they look pretty good. And if someone has any right to complain, it's me, because they broke my entire monocle package in this update. So that was fun. Yeah, these little rounded edges, that wreaked havoc. It's kind of amazing how they did that. So yeah, it's interesting, and it hasn't been in Revit yet until 2023. Mm-hmm. So in Revit 22, you can actually force load versions of Dynamo, and I don't recommend you do it unless you're crazy, because it breaks Dynamo Player, it breaks generative design, and all sorts of stuff. I do it because I build packages, like you mentioned. But Revit 23 marks the first time that we're seeing all of these dark mode nodes. So I'll just open Dynamo at this point. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you can see the library looks different, has all this kind of different colors, this cyan in there. All the packages lost their cool icons, so that's one thing that's kind of a bummer. We worked really hard to get those icons, and they're gone. Are
they gone everywhere, or do they exist somewhere now?
They do exist nested down into the subcategory. Yeah, so Clockwork has his icon still down in the subcategories. Mm-hmm. It used to appear at the top, but it did start to look like a bad website, I guess, with every icon being so different. Mm-hmm, so yeah, so that's kind of like one of the big changes immediately. All these icons at the top are different. There's a Dynamo menu now that came out in 2.12. And it has preferences in it, so it's kind of cool. It doesn't do a whole lot yet. Mm-hmm. I can't click on some of this, so they're just teasing us at this point with some of this.
This is what's coming.
But it's leading to things like, if there's preferences, using logic that starts to tell me that potentially preferences are something that could be customizable. Mm-hmm. We could start to see things like that. And we've always had Dynamo settings.xml to deploy stuff to people. But this is a new version of that. So that's what's kind of cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say kind of go experiment with some of that too.
So let me ask, because I'm a huge fan of dark mode. If you saw my desktop, everything I have, including Office 365 and Teams, everything is dark mode. Chrome, I mean, you name it. Even on my phone, everything is is dark mode. So I'm cool with the UI part of it, but functionally, you mentioned that it broke Monocle. I mean, what is it changing functionally to the user of Dynamo other than the way it looks?
Yeah, so
like why did they bother doing this? Is there, what was the purpose, and what does it mean? What does it mean for me now that I'm going in here if I just learned Dynamo on the other versions or the yellow version, like you and I were talking about, right? in Vasari,
yes.
the yellow nodes.
Yes. Yeah, so I think part of what it starts to lead to, so like if I just start kind of building something out, you'll see how it looks. I tend to build graphs while I'm talking, but if we start to build things that collect things, and we'll get into one of these other things in a minute, we'll see kind of how this works. So this is Monocle right now, for instance, though, all this little canvas stuff that's not out of the box, but they wanted to start to expand upon Dynamo. I think this is me just kind of making an assumption as someone who builds tools as well. You want to add features because people are asking for them, but updating what you currently have would be more work than just kind of refreshing the whole thing. So at this point, like, they now have things like drag nodes into groups, which is really nice. We've wanted that for a long time. We've been able to add things to groups with like a right click as well. So groups add to group, but like dragging so satisfying,
Yes.
So that's really nice to have that now. Groups also have headers and additional stuff. We'll just call it, if I could spell. So now we have a description and a header. I don't know that the old UI could have handled some of that. So I think that's partly why. Take all this kind of like, with a grain of salt too, because this is me assuming just as someone who builds tools. I just went through a whole update to one of our tools at Parallax to add features people have been asking for, and to add them to the current iteration would have been a nightmare for me. So I just kind of rebuilt the code base, I also probably am not the best coder there is in the world, so that's probably also why I had to update everything. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's partly why. There's another thing here too, and I'm not gonna be able to show it live, but when you install this version of Dynamo fresh, they have that little splash screen that we all ignore, right? This is like public stuff, right? So it tells you get started with Dynamo. It gives you an example graph, and it shows you what Dynamo is.
Right.
There is an icon on that start screen that shows a hand touching nodes. So like the assumption, and this was actually something Carl Storms and I were talking about, it's kind of interesting because that UI is kind of suggesting touch style things. And littler nodes and menus don't really work as well if you're on your phone or tablet with your thumb trying to push this node right here. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I don't know. Based on what I've seen on the splash screen, it's just kind of interesting though. So that's another assumption.
So before we jump forward, then you just mentioned installing this fresh. So obviously this is this is getting delivered with 2023, right? I'm assuming. Now that it's out with 2023, is it safe to install with 2022, for example, or 2021, what are the rules of engagement there?
Yeah, so for installing Dynamo on Revit, it's kind of interesting. So like if you were to go to dynamobuilds.com, you'll see all the installers. You're not going to see anything in here that says Dynamo install. You're going to see Dynamo core runtime. In Revit 2020, they stopped having you install Dynamo separately. So on their website too, I actually think if you go to Get Dynamo, it'll tell you that it's now included with Dynamo. So one of the biggest questions on the forum for years was which Dynamo can I install? I need to deploy this to the firm and things like that. So the Dynamo team made a conscious decision to just bundle it with Revit since 2020. now the biggest question on the forums, how do I update my Dynamo? Because I want the new one, right?
Right. Yeah. I want the dark mode.
So yeah, so now it's totally like you're in 2022 and you have all these nodes now. That being said, what I just showed, the collapsible groups with descriptions, I don't know if I showed collapsible actually, but the groups with descriptions and everything that can now collapse, that's all backwards compatible still to 2.12, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, you can't necessarily update Dynamo in 22 a authorized way.
Right.
That's just kind of how I'll say that, because you can, because Dynamo is still a plugin to Revit. So that's like kind of one of the considerations. So like if you're one of those grumpy users who don't want people to have Dynamo as well, you could still force uninstall it for them if you really wanted. So under your program files, there's still a Dynamo for Revit folder in here.
Got it.
And that contains all of the sandbox stuff. So this is all of Dynamo's inner workings. So if you're a really like go-getter kind of user, you can actually migrate this down to 2022 if you wanted. Like I said, you're probably going to break your install, so do it on a VM if you want to test it or something. Don't do it on a production machine, right? But yeah, it's kind of one of the things is it was a blessing to not have to install Dynamo anymore, but then it's also kind of a bummer when people, I mean, with Revit features too, you see features and you're like, well, that's great, I'm in 2017, you know, like
yeah.
there's always those projects that have been going on forever.
Awesome. So that's great. I think for now basically you stay with whatever version your Revit has for now, you know, until you hit limitations and you're getting a little more complex. Maybe that's when you can start looking at, like you said, the breaking the mold a little bit. Okay, so new UI, we see that with some new functions in the group, which is great. So what else we got?
Yeah, so I think other things that are added that I'm really excited about are, there's a lot of nodes in here actually from Rhythm and a package called Bang that I publish as well. So what's really cool about that is these are now out of the box. So like if you were to go down into Elements, I think, or is it Application? I'm going to get it wrong. And these are my nodes. And then Warning, you now have the ability to start to parse files for warnings out of the box. This was a package you used to have to install that I worked on. So now all these things are now available to us in that way. So you can start to actually work down into your model and see what things are causing warnings. So you can get like the elements that fail. So if you have overlapping elements, a question came up earlier about duplicate families. This is kind of in that similar thought. You can start to figure out what's causing warnings in your model and cleaning them up. And that's now out of the box. You don't have to install another package to do that. That's awesome. That's immediately helping with a deployment issue right away. So that's really cool. So that means that package that I built is now like going to get retired. So it's just kind of one of those things where it's getting sent off now.
Are you seeing more and more of that, it seems? So the most used packages and nodes are getting built into out of the box now?
Yeah, so they tend to start to absorb things that they see that are being useful. There's actually a whole nother section of nodes that appeared in 2.12 as well under Application Family Document that let you start to create parameters and families and things. This is amazing because family parameter creation always required custom packages for a very long time. And these will work on one family at a time, you know. You have to be in the family, but if you want to batch it, there are free tools out there that do that now, to where you build one Dynamo graph, you point at a directory, and then it'll go through and rename a parameter on every family in the directory or something. So it's really cool that these are out of the box now too, because a lot of times those packages, when you go to batch them, they just kind of freak out because we're loading the documents in memory, and it's this whole crazy thing, you know. So that's another one that's really exciting. Generally, I don't really know what their logic is for absorbing nodes or not. I know that they kind of like, when you opt in, you start to tell them how many of a node you use. One of my most popular nodes from my package is set parameter by name type or instance. And it's a node that I don't think they'll absorb, because it's like, you shouldn't use it a lot if you know what kind of parameter you're working with. So yeah, in addition to that, packages like Clockwork and Rhythm we actually monitor which nodes are getting added. So like these are future rhythm nodes that might go away, and there's a lot of them at this point, which is kind of exciting. A lot of people ask me like, are you offended that your package is getting nodes taken out? And I'm like, well, first of all, I don't have to maintain those anymore. And then it's better for everyone, because now you can have this stuff just available when you open Dynamo fresh. And a lot of the times I really spend a lot of time caring about beginner users who I don't want to explain how to install a package when they first open Dynamo, you know?
Right. Understandable. And that's always, honestly, that's always been a huge challenge in general is, you know, the amount of custom packages, the versions of the packages, the versions of Dynamo you wrote them in, the version of Revit you're in, right? So definitely, you know, the more over time that you know it can be out of the box is probably better. But thankfully to guys like you for creating the nodes initially, right? So someone had to create them initially to show the need and want. So that's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, for sure. And there's always more nodes to make. I mean, everything you figure out how to do in Dynamo, there's always going to be another node someone needs. So always start making nodes yourself, suggest them to people and their packages. And generally speaking, people are pretty excited to add functionality, you know?
Awesome. Great. So new UI with some little functions there that we talked about, some new out of the box nodes, some of them pulled from packages like your own. So what else do we want to highlight?
Yeah, so 4 things to highlight as well. This one's really cool. So I'll add a note with Control W on my keyboard. And like, I tend to add notes kind of saying what I was thinking, you know, like get this, you know, I don't know. And put it near the node, right? But like, that's great. You know, like that doesn't work really well. So you are now able to right click and pin a note to a node, which is amazing, because like now that follows it around. It's a sticky note now, right? So that's what's really cool.
No, that's huge.
So that one's like one of the big ones that I really like as well. Other things that are really great. So I mentioned units. I think before we went live, we were talking about units. There are a whole set of units nodes in here now in Dynamo that are huge. And part of the reason they're so exciting is because they have functions in here to start to parse units in like a natural language way. So like if I were to search for a units node, and we'll do feet in this case. Sorry, everyone who's not in the States. And we'll plug in the unit, and then I'll just put a string node. So like if you start to type things a little more naturally like you would like in Revit, we can actually start to parse those for numerical values. This is sweet for Dynamo Player, because now you can even get really creative and have someone enter in a whole bunch of numbers. So like if you were to like tell them separate them with a comma and a space, you know, or something, you could start to get really creative and split those out from Dynamo Player and build graphs that like just have really interesting interactions, right? So we'll use a code block to split it. And then you can actually parse those expressions for the numerical value now. And a string is an input available in Dynamo Player, and it always has been. This other node number from feet and inches is not available in Dynamo Player, and I can't even find it. The search still sucks, so we got
that hasn't improved. I was literally going to ask as you were doing that. I was going to say, have you noticed any changes in the search?
Oh my gosh. Do they even have that node anymore? Okay, I don't know. But yeah, it's a faster search, but maybe that node just not in there, so I'm being a bit unfair maybe. From feet. Shoot, I don't know. Okay. Someone tell me if I missed that node getting removed. I don't know.
We'll take a look. No, so this is interesting. So I do want to touch on that a little bit. So
another one.
So with these new unit nodes, I guess what you're getting at is you can start having a little more control when you have actual unit inputs in Dynamo Player. So if you have user inputs for Dynamo Player, for example, which is huge, right? Because you know you can customize, you know, depending on what it is that you're doing, you know, having a user be able to actually type in values, and then you're converting those to usable units within the Dynamo environment, right? Is huge, right? It's, you're not sitting there figuring 0.466 feet, because that's the only way the node would work if I pulled it through that way.
Exactly. And yeah, because a lot of times you're using number sliders, which are great.
Right.
But the fact that we can use a string input, and then if you mark the units as an input as well, that's awesome, because now I could build a graph that has a units input, and if you happen to be in a metric file, you pick metric, enter it in based on what you think it should be, and in that case you type like 10 millimeters or whatever, and it would actually parse it for you. So it's like, this is kind of a result of some of like the units changes in the API in general. So I think if I were to type like 10 millimeters, it should, so like in this case my units differ in my project, or no, this is a metric file. So yeah, that one, like, I'm so excited for this one. When I saw this getting added to Sandbox, I was like, holy smokes. And you can actually start to add your own units. So when I was testing these nodes, I added a Dogecoin as a unit, and I had to make a conversion, but it changes so much that they didn't want to take it into the core. So
yeah. No, that's
this pinning
great.
thing too, I kind of snuck in there. I think Paul pointed that out.
Pinning wires, is that what that was?
Yeah. So pinning wires is another one that's in here that's really exciting. So if you hover on a wire, you get a pin or a watch node. So if you do a pin, you can now start to clean up your graph and do crazy stuff like that, or you can just make it legible, right? So like, that's awesome. This is something that I know a lot of people have wanted for a long time. One of my friends, Sean Fruin, actually avoids wires as much as he can and uses a ton of code blocks because he hates when things cross. So maybe now he can just start using nodes with wires and pinning them, right?
And the watch is just
hover,
adding a watch node in between. Is that what that's doing?
Yeah, so the watch will just add that watch node in between. So if I hover,
just efficiency wise, that's great.
Yes, so now you can start to debug that stuff right in the middle of it. So that's really cool. And that watch node thing's interesting too, because it actually gave me an idea for something I want to try to work on one day, to where like you can drag a node on a wire and it would connect it in line. So like, that's something I want to try to add. I haven't added it yet, but it's pretty interesting. And I think if you start to hover on wires too, it will tell you ins and outs of the wire. So it'll start to tell you what it's connected to and what's flowing through it. So that's really exciting too for debugging, because I've seen some graphs where wires are going across the whole graph,
Yep. It's funny, we have Rob in the chat is excited about the units because he's Canadian.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, it's cool, because even for like the sample files from Dynamo Player, it's limited. There used to be samples for metric and imperial for a lot of these. So now these sample files for Dynamo Player have even improved because of that. So some of these just account for your units now, which is really cool. That's another thing, is Dynamo Player has these awesome images now. So that's like another cool thing.
And those images you can add
all this.
To your custom graphs as well, not just the
So let's just open one up real quick and we can look at that too. I won't like talk smack, but I did have a crash earlier that made me very worried. So
oh boy,
you'll see me get like a little nervous
with Dynamo Player, or just with
with Dynamo. I think I did something. I'll own it, but yeah. So for documenting your graphs, first of all, document your graphs. Like I think every time I'm on here, I tell people document your graphs.
So important.
But now you have other ways to do it with this extension show graph properties. So we have a description, we have an image or a thumbnail, and this gets serialized in the DYN as like all just the text of it. So you don't have to have that linked on your network. It gets serialized into the file. You can add a learn more URL. So like if you were to hit this question mark, it'll open that up. So this is great if you have company wiki pages, or you link it to a YouTube channel with a tutorial or something. And you can also add custom properties that serialize with the file as well. So you can go in and start to name the property like who did this. And then like you can put something, and that follows the file around too. So that's really cool. At a minimum, I would suggest start adding a description, author name, and a learn more, because the custom properties don't get revealed out here quite yet. So that's just one thing to keep in mind.
And now can you do that? Does it have to be a Dynamo player graph, as in sort of set up that way with the?
So that's just in Dynamo graphs in general,
Yeah.
starting in 2.12. So what's really cool is if you're in Revit 22, those descriptions, those carry through bidirectionally between the two versions. So you can start adding those in 2.12. Yeah. Trying to think if there's anything else on that. I think that's it right now.
Awesome. Great. All right, so let's see. We went through the UI, went through some out of the box nodes. We talked about the units, a little bit on Dynamo Player. I feel like there was something else on Dynamo Player, some other updates, but maybe I'm missing. No.
So Dynamo Player, the inputs have been there. Oh, folders. Folders are new, right?
They I think they might be. There's something about organizing Dynamo Player that's slipping my mind.
Yeah, so you can now add folders into this UI. So you can have folders for different graphs that you work on, different workflows, project stages as well. So that's another thing that you can have in here are the folders, and they are searchable. So that's really cool too if you start to have a lot of these. The Dynamo Player, you still have to have packages installed on people's machine if they're using Dynamo Player. So that's still something that's going on. But you can start documenting these to where you add a lot of that info serialized in the graph, which is really nice. It also updates live. So you used to have to close Dynamo Player and reopen it all the time when you add like content to the folder. This now just refreshes, which is awesome. What's kind of interesting is Dynamo Player's UI is actually informed from Generative Design's UI, which is kind of an interesting thing. So like Generative Design, the fuel that runs it, it's Dynamo graphs.
Right.
And it actually informed Dynamo Player's UI, which is really cool. You might not use Generative Design a lot, but now if you use Dynamo Player, it's kind of like a byproduct of it, which is cool. Generative Design stores the packages, so I'm like, you're almost there, guys, just add that little last part, so hopefully.
No, that's cool. So it's that, I mean, from the way you sort of just explained Dynamo Player and some of the new, I guess not totally new, but the additions of the descriptions, the properties, all that stuff, definitely sounds like they're spending some time thinking about making it easier to deploy Dynamo graphs. It's right.
I think that's
which is great.
The easy assumption to make. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think the last update to Dynamo Player was 2018, and they added inputs to it, and that was the one update, and it hasn't been updated since then. So, like, you want to talk about lack of updates for something? Dynamo Player's just been like left out in the rain, for a while.
Yeah. Awesome. So okay. So what else? What else in Dynamo was really getting you jazzed up? And have we missed anything that's really exciting you, or maybe it's in the API, the back end, some of the stuff, that you see sort of this release opening the possibilities for?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things Dynamo wise, other than I like the UI, I do. I think it looks nice. I freaked out when I first saw it too, because it was kind of bigger. I got really mad because it broke everything in Monocle nearly. But not mad, I just had to log off for a day. No, I'm just kidding. No, but a lot of those nodes getting absorbed is really exciting. I'm also starting to see things getting more mature. So like if you were to place like an all element, I hate this search. I'm gonna make okay. Oh, I am in Sandbox. I'm over here getting mad at Dynamo and I'm in Sandbox searching for Revit nodes. Okay. So it's not their fault. Okay, so if you were to place like a node and you double click on inputs, you get predictive inputs now. You've gotten these since like Dynamo 2.10, I think, or like Revit 19. Revit 21, excuse me. Revit 19 was a package. This has kind of not been amazing up until now. So I think this release is now representing this actually starting to work well.
I was just going to say, now if I've never had any luck with that, so I'm glad it's looking...
So it's really nice. So like that placed a categories node. That's right. That's more than likely what I want, So that's like really exciting. and it works on outputs. They actually started with outputs first, and I was pretty vocal about that too. And I was like, we need inputs. No one yes, people place nodes and wonder what's next. More people place a node and wonders what should connect to it.
Right.
So they added inputs, and that's now working better. Another one that works really well is if you open a package that has open a graph that has packages in use within it, and now starts to suggest things a little bit better. So like if I were to, let's try to open a file real quick. We'll do that live. Hopefully. I'm always trying to figure out what I can open. Just kidding. So this dependencies thing has existed for a while. So if you have packages in use in a graph, it'll prompt you to install them. It's called workspace references, and it was a beta feature for a while. But now if you go to install them, it's a lot better. It's working better in my opinion. It used to suggest old versions of packages and things like that. So now it's like, it's actually updating them. And like, you'll see I shouldn't have any yellow nodes, but we're going to see another thing here too, which is kind of cool that I opened this. It tells you like, hey, we tried to resolve it. You might want to look at it. It didn't just not work, which is what it used to do.
Right.
So that's really exciting. This one's going to like kind of get everyone though. This was a 2.12 graph that I upgraded, and you'll see what happened. Everything's overlapping because the nodes are bigger. So there's no easy way to say it. You're going to have to QA some of this. You really are. Everyone might not know, but Dynamo has a function in it. If you select a group, for instance, and hit Control L, it cleans everything in the group. So it actually relaxes that group a bit. And it did pretty darn good. Sometimes that's also a feature that I think's improved some. So that kind of relaxed all those. You'll see that and I like to do it on a group by group basis. You can do it on a whole graph basis, which we'll try. But like that didn't do everything I wanted. So if you're a little more specific, it relaxes it more. Yeah. So yeah, that's one thing to keep in mind is this release will have you start to QA some of your graphs a bit, which is a little unfortunate, but it is a byproduct of the UI change.
Right.
Another one I didn't mention was groups within groups. So if you drag a group in a group, it'll actually add it to the group too. I drug it into a nested group just now. That was like a mess, but that's another kind of cool feature too.
Yep.
And like I said, collapsible groups with inputs and outputs. That's really huge, especially if you're building graphs that you don't want people freaking out at all the nodes. You can do that. And Control L's been there since like Dynamo 2. Or 1.3. So it's kind of funny. Super hidden. It's actually right here somewhere. Clean up node layout. And that's been there since, since I've been using Dynamo almost, I think.
So that's good to know, though. It's good to know that if you're opening old graphs, to be ready for...
There's hope.
If there's hope, you can open them, but be ready for the overlapping that you just saw there.
So I accidentally showed it, but it's going to be a thing that does happen. So it is a good time to QA your graphs though, because like I said, a lot of these custom packages, their nodes are out of the box now. So it's a good moment to also check that at the same time. You don't want to just keep using a package's nodes if it's out of the box, for instance, because now you're starting to help yourself out there,
I think I remember you mentioning something with lacing or list lacing. Is that new or no?
Oh, so lacing, so that one 2.12 added this auto, I think, or was it before?
It might have been earlier.
I'm not even gonna remember, but it added the concept of auto, so that's something that's still in there. I doubt anyone's coming from like 1.3 to this, hopefully, which is Revit 2017. I mean, maybe you are, but if you are, you'll have to kind of double check your lacing. More often than not, this auto should work. Where it doesn't work, you end up messing with levels, which work down into the nested portions of the list as well. So that one, it's still, there's a whole section like in the primer about the lacing and the levels. So I would suggest to kind of check that out too.
Yeah, definitely. That was probably one of the biggest things for me when I learned actually understand list and lacing and that kind of stuff was super helpful. There's a question in the chat that I'll just ask a different way, which is, so you just opened the 2.12, right, in 213. You just adjusted all these things. Now, would you suggest, let's say you're managing or running both versions, or 210 or whatever, right? Would you suggest at this point saving as and having the two versions, or if you were to open this now after cleaning it up, doing all this work back in 212, now you have the other overlap, or they're farther apart, or as far as the backwards compatibility in that sense of it, are you, once you upgrade kind of like Revit, are you just figuring this stays in 213 and the other one stays in 212?
So if I were managing graphs like at a firm, I wouldn't want to manage multiple versions of a graph. Even building code, like how we build it, like for apps, if you're duplicating your code base for each version of Revit, it's a nightmare to make changes. It's so hard to do. And Dynamo graphs are similar in that way. I opened the 2.13 graph that I have open in 23. So this graph, I went ahead and opened it in 22 with 2.12. You'll see that it's pretty spaced out. Like you wouldn't have built a graph like this. I would suggest, if possible, that you would make updates in 2.13 and just kind of leave it alone in 2.12.
Yeah.
And it would still just work. For backwards compatibility, Dynamo uses a process called semantic versioning. So as long as this first number matches, you should be able to use it in any version that starts with that. So Revit 2018 has 2.0.4. I could open this graph in 2.0.4 and it should still work as long as I didn't use any nodes that aren't there yet. So like this specific graph, for instance, it's calculating exit paths, that path of travel. They added that in 22, right? So like if I open this in 2018 and I expected that to work, like wrong, like at least this is somewhat backwards compatible. You're not going to downgrade a Revit model, for instance, so you get more compatibility than you would with like Revit. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, I think it does. I think I was just thinking along the lines of what you're thinking. If someone's thinking about it, is it worth the effort of trying to manage both? And it sounds like you'd probably want to manage both at this point. Well, or the other one's stays where it is and the new one gets developed, whatever it is. So are there things with some of these added features, added nodes, API tweak, I know you mentioned there's quite a bit on the API side. What are some things that maybe you're thinking are possible now within Dynamo that maybe weren't before this release? Is there anything, some idea or anything that you've had sort of in mind that you're thinking now that now that I can do X, Y, and Z, this is what I think could be possible that wasn't?
Yeah, so I think with 23, we'll see some new nodes happen, specifically in things like I'm going to add some in Rhythm, for instance. So like a lot of these features that might not seem so exciting on the surface. So let's see, I have another 23 open as well. Yeah. So like, on the surface, changing a viewport feels less exciting as well between viewports. They added API for that at the same time. So like what's really exciting about Revit releases in that regard is like, there's not a lot of like user facing changes sometimes. This view on sheet thing's pretty exciting. I think that's pretty cool. But the API changes or the new features they add, the API changes around them are really cool because like this viewport changing API, you can have like cartoon sets now. With all your viewports laid out, and then you can have a Dynamo graph that swaps the viewports for you or something like that. Yeah. So it's really cool in that way. A lot of the features they add APIs for them. So that's like always something I'm watching. In regards to this viewport one, you used to be able to get a viewport by getting, or the ID of the view belonging to a viewport with view.viewport ID or viewport ID.view or something. So now they just made that to where they added what's called a setter to it in the API. So now you can actually feed in an ID to that as well. So like what's cool is like there's no node for it yet, but I just did it in Python. If you were to run I'm in automatic. So if you were to run this, you can start to actually animate the viewport, which is kind of funny.
Right. So you're just swapping the view using the API.
So now the API has that ability to where you pick the viewport and you feed it an ID of a view, and it'll literally update the viewport, which is really cool. Because it'd be even cooler if they hadn't given us the view title APIs last year. So like I think they kind of got the reverse there. They should have done this one first and then the viewport ones, the view titles. Because this one's less exciting because now we can create viewports with view titles that are locatable, which are also new nodes that were added in Revit 22 that maybe a lot of people haven't seen. So you can set the view title length and the location now. But then they added the viewport thing too, which is pretty cool. So like those kind of things are exciting because I think a lot of people I know have like this project setup graph. And for the longest time, it's like, oh, the viewports are what you get. The view title, it is what you get because there's no API for it.
Right.
And then they added that. And now it's like, if you want to set it up and have a really light template with like really empty views, you can potentially do that and then create all this stuff and swap out the viewports or something. So it's kind of cool in that way.
No, it's a great
I don't know
point.
what all practical use cases for it, but I thought I'd have fun with it at least.
It's a great point in the sense that, looking at the Revit release features, knowing that could potentially open the door for API and Dynamo stuff. Like I didn't even think about it until you mentioned it, but having that icon next to the view, for the views on sheets, I don't know what the API looks like for that, but there could be now the potential for accessing those icons and doing other things within it, right? Which is huge.
That is
right?
An excellent point. Yes.
Right. And so again, I don't know how it works, but I see that now. And now that you mentioned like this opens the door, we can possibly do more than just show it's on a sheet, right? There's different ways that you can, and that helps huge because those view browsers, that's the project browsers and can be a nightmare, right? And so any way to graphically organize it better is a good thing.
Yeah, that's a really excellent point because so I have the API open, the SDK that comes with Revit. And it tells you what's new, and project browser options are like a whole new class of properties that we can start to modify. It only has one in it right now, but using what you just said, there's potential in the future for some really cool stuff if they add more functionality for us to tweak.
Right, because those icons probably exist as two images, ISOs. I mean, I don't know what they are in the file, but then if they start unlocking that, maybe you can start putting your own spin on what that's showing, which is cool.
Yeah, you can almost have it tied to like a sheet issued parameter or something, or we sell a plugin that links details between views. So having that icon show that it's linked, oh my gosh, our users would be pumped because now people know to leave that view alone because it updates from a source file or something.
Right. Cool.
Yeah, and they add all of these things in the API. So like we were talking before we started the stream too, I always read like the release notes for the API and like, not everyone gets to use this stuff right away. I know. With Dynamo, you start to, but it's really cool because it gives hints into what else might come. And then there's even other like really like kind of interesting things. So like who on the stream was like an AutoCAD user and loved the change space command, right? They're adding APIs to let you transform from a viewport to paper space in Revit. That's freaking sick. Like, I don't know what I'm going to use it for, but like if someone went through and clouded in the views or something and we want them on the sheet, we could potentially start to transform that stuff from a view and do like a change space command in Revit, I don't know if people still do stuff in the views or did everyone learn their lesson, but we used to cloud on the sheet when I was at a firm.
Yeah. There's debate, but I agree with that on the sheet. I think functionally,
we reissued whole sheets. We didn't do sketches. So.
You just cloud the whole title block, anyways.
Yeah, that's all I would do. Yeah, no.
There's a question from High Res. Any way to manipulate a view reference with Dynamo? I'm assuming.
So a view reference.
I'm assuming he means when
so
placing.
Like re-reference it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But I don't know for sure.
Yeah, if you were to do like a reference other view action, that is available like as an API. So you could start to re-reference if that's what it means.
I think that may be where he's getting at, manipulating. It may be more, maybe like batch manipulating or changing or something like that. Maybe I'm not
yeah
100% sure. But.
That one actually reminds me of something else too. So when you draw a section in Revit, of course, everyone's drawn a section, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's selected after you draw it. Mm-hmm. So we were also talking before the call, and there's a new API for when your selection changes in Revit, you can trigger events. What's really cool is you could start to maybe have apps that suggest when someone draws a section to get that thing named or whatever, you know, so you could start to bug users to not create all these darn sections in the model.
Yeah.
Or you can start to categorize them or something. You can start to do neat things with that selection. So that's another new API that's hidden.
Yeah.
And I'll show.
Yeah, you've created too many working sections. Stop.
Yeah, that was always a problem when I was at a firm.
There's another question. Oh no, actually, I think it was just an idea. Scoured mentioned can you copy and paste text from a view to a sheet and vice versa. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. Even if you had text notes, not just revisions.
Yeah. So that transform thing in the API, I think it starts to open up to say this isn't gonna like hold me back anymore. You know.
Right.
So
although I don't know. Again, I don't know why you would want
welcome.
text notes on a sheet, but I'm not going to go down that road either.
Yeah. To each their own, right?
To each their own. Not according to Aaron.
It's cool.
He just said there's two schools of thought: clouding on the sheet and the wrong.
Yeah. The interesting thing with that though is it does go the other way around. So like from paper space to model space. So let's say you had a user do a detail and they put all the notes in paper space. You can start to transform that now.
Now that'd be useful.
That's awesome.
That would be useful.
Yeah. So that's like, it's not a command in Revit, right? Like you're not on the ribbon and you see change space. That's not in there, but they added it in here in the API. So like really cool, you know?
Yeah. And I guess in theory,
like,
you could, the event of someone placing text on a sheet could also flag a warning that says stop, right? Because that's an event, right? That's a mouse event. So, or an action.
Exactly.
So. Interesting.
Yeah, so those are really neat ones. Other ones that you're starting to see mature too. So like this placement on sheet, that icon, it has an API attached to it. So if you're building Dynamo graphs and you place views on sheets, you can start to filter those out with a node now. That way you're not trying on views that already exist on a sheet like floor plans, you know? So
right.
That one's really exciting as well. And then duplicating with sheet was added last year to the API and to Revit. It was a new feature. They refined that feature further to where now you have options. So you can say duplicate sheet with detailing, views only, views and detailing. All those things can now come with the sheets, or you can just duplicate an empty sheet and it comes in with the title block and all that stuff. But kind of cool because they gave us the API to duplicate sheets last year with that function, but it was all or nothing. So now they've refined that more.
Yeah, more options within it. Awesome. Awesome, man. Any other final? I'm just checking to make sure there's no other questions in the chat. Any other final points you wanted to make before we wrap up?
Yeah, so like I said, I know that like all of these API features aren't like front facing for everyone. With Dynamo, being a Dynamo user, a lot of the time though, that does mean you can start to get those if a package author adds them. So always be kind of a little open-minded in that way, which is kind of nice. With your Dynamo graphs, this release is going to be a little frustrating because of the node sizes and the Iron Python stuff. So I didn't even touch on that. But if you install packages like Clockwork or something like that, you're going to have to install another package called Iron Python. And that's because that's the version of Python they used. It's all fixable. It's one of those things that you just have to be aware of. And I thought I'd actually copied that, but I guess I didn't. Oh, well. I was going to show. So there's a thing on GitHub that I added. And you can actually, your whole ribbon will rotate as you select things. So, yeah, spoiler alert. Yeah, I didn't load it right. Dang it. It is open source, though, so you can have it if you want it. But yeah. But yeah, so the selection change is really easy from a code point of view. You literally say every time a selection changes, I want to do something. So that's really cool. Oh, there it is. It loaded. Maybe we'll get it in before at the last minute.
Oh, we're good. We can get it in. While it's opening, I did have one question that I was curious as you're studying sort of the changes in the API and starting to see some of these tweaks. What about the BIM 360 or Construction Cloud and is there are they focused on the Dynamo API side of it of ways that we can interact more with that side of Forge and the Revit and everything else that's happening on this Construction Cloud side? Have you seen any development there? Because I just haven't seen a lot of talk about the potential use of this Dynamo even for when working in that environment.
Yeah. So also, if people don't realize, Dynamo is made to work on the current file you're in. That's how it works. What it literally does is like while your Revit's making a change, it like injects itself into there and waits for changes to happen. So it's like this just sitting there.
Right.
When Dynamo switched to 2.0, it switched to a file format called JSON, and that's JavaScript Object Notation, and that's like a web standard. So that's interesting. First of all,
yeah.
Things with the unit nodes, those were added because those are Forge units. That was a Revit API change, and those have been added into Dynamo as well. In addition to that, they've been adding a lot of APIs around getting cloud model paths and things like that. So like, I don't see why not. A lot of that stuff that they've shown before, like the Revit processing in the cloud, whatever it was called, design automation for Revit. Man, that'd be really cool if you could start to run Dynamo graphs on some of that.
Right. Right.
And I think with some of this stuff getting refined in that way, it could be a possibility. That's just me kind of like wishing, right? In regards to just working on BIM 360 files, as long as you're in the file, Dynamo's going to work, right?
Yeah.
Batching them, Bird Tools. You know what? Bird Tools uses the Forge API to batch Dynamo graphs on BIM 360 models. I totally forgot about that. So he has a tool called Dynamo Multiplayer that lets you iterate over BIM 360 files. Neat. He's a madman. So,
no, that's great. And actually, Rob mentioned in the chat that if there was some sort of Dynamo for Forge, it'd be great because the stepping stone to the Forge API is pretty big. And I've heard similar comments here and there that the Forge API is a different beast. So
yeah, I mentioned we have an app that links details into files, and with that, we always so everyone went to working from home, right? And everyone's on cloud models. Our tool was made to work with a resource file on a server. So everyone was like, oh my gosh, we need to work with BIM 360 files. And we started looking at Forge stuff, and I'm just like, whoa, this is so much. It's not geared towards how I learned a lot of this. I learned a lot of this stuff in a desktop manner, right?
Right.
A lot of those web APIs are confusing to me. So we worked around it ultimately without having to use cloud credits too. So that was the byproduct, right?
Right.
Is you link your resource file in from your BIM 360 docs, and then you load from the linked file into your model, and it doesn't cost you money, right?
Right.
Other than your subscription, but yeah. So yeah, that's kind of interesting as well. But yeah, I think if we start to see some of that Forge stuff coming into Dynamo, it does start to make that a easier barrier if you want to get into Forge development.
Right.
A lot of the stuff they tell you to use Forge, so I don't see why they wouldn't want that. And I do know too that there was a survey from Jeremy Tamick, the building coder, that was saying, what do you want Dynamo on the cloud to do? So I don't know if that was, I don't know when it was open, what happened with it, but it was a thing that they sent out. And that was public once again.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is what I was going to show. So as you select things, your ribbon. So that's using the selection API, and it's on GitHub, so that way you can see it. But yeah, you can start to mess with your user.
With everyone, yeah.
If they have too many things selected, your ribbon's going to go away, right? And then once you clear your selection, it pops back up.
Awesome. So cool. Well, John, I appreciate it. I think this was great. I think hopefully it gives everyone out there a little overview of what's new, not just in Dynamo, but also in Revit and how that affects Dynamo. So that was a cool little point there. So all that being said, where can everyone find you, John?
Yeah, so Twitter, my blog, 60 Second Revit, YouTube, all that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
Reach out, follow me on those things. And yeah, I've been trying to post more videos these days. I posted
a lot of work,
this Revit one right away. Yeah, editing and posting videos it's a whole thing. But yeah, so yeah, awesome. I try to post those pretty often. So the YouTube stuff and all that, just
great. Yeah, I'll put links to all the channels below. So and you guys here live with the chat, I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed. With that, John, I guess we're gonna wrap this up now. And so everyone who's here, again, thank you for joining John. Subscribe to the channel, please. I'll see you guys next week, same time, same place. And yeah, everyone have a great weekend. Talk to you all soon.
Thank you.